Hi and welcome to Tales from the Gulag. Today is the 12th of April 2019 and my thought for this video is, and now the election is upon us. People around me today are going to have to forgive my apparent lack of energy, my lack of smiles, my lack of focus, because I had an absolutely lousy night's sleep for two reasons, and I suggest both reasons are actually good. Reason number one has been watching videos of two people who were witnesses to the US Congress's Judiciary Committee hearing on white nationalism and hate crimes. We have to remember that the US Congress is now dominated by the leftist Democrats. And anyway, two people got a lot of good attention. In this particular 3-hour session, there were 7 witnesses. 2 were Conservatives, and the rest were, of course, Democrat leftist activists. The one person that got much deserved attention was Candace Owens. This young lady has only just recently come to my attention, but the more I see of her, the more I actually like her. She is a black woman who has experienced hate, but refuses to see herself as a victim, which is, of course, plenty reason enough for the left to hate her. In her opening statement to the committee, she cited a recent incident where she was run out of a restaurant by a group of white supremacists, including having water thrown in her face, and she was abused. And these white supremacist fascist thugs were actually Antifa. They call themselves anti-fascist. Some irony there. And Antifa is a creature of the Democrat Party. And then one complete sleazebag, a certain Democrat representative from California, one Ted Lieu, a Chinese guy, then played a 30-second clip of a talk by Ms. Owens, and through it he tried to smear her as a Nazi, a Hitler supporter. Funny that, given that she is a black woman who is currently working for a Jew, Dennis Prager, some Nazi. I recommend watching the clips of her opening speech and her response to Liu's attempted smear. Very revealing. And I have watched it over and over again, and it was so sweet to see someone so eloquently refuse to take the bullcrap from a sham inquiry. Both are only 5 minutes long, and both were worth watching. And then there was a Mr. Mort Klein. Mr. Klein is president of the Zionists of America. I think it's America's largest Jewish group. He got less attention, but he was just as eloquent, despite the tics and grunts coming from his Tourette's syndrome. He called out the anti-Semitic attacks, particularly on campus from Muslim groups, particularly naming students like Students for Justice for Palestine. He also called out the Democrats for their protection of anti-Semites among their own ranks, quoting specifically Ilhan Omar. Now, this was so delicious, and full credit to both of these people. That was part of the reason for my lack of sleep last night. But the other reason for my sleeplessness was talkback radio. We now have an election date in Australia, the 18th of May, coming up. And the topic for discussion on this show was, what issues do we think are important in the upcoming election? I resolved long ago that if such a chance came along, then I am in. If you heard it, I'll let you be the judge of how I went, but given that it was incredibly nerve-wracking, it was not a situation that was comfortable for me, Well, I'm pretty satisfied that I did okay. I had to quickly make a plan of attack, mentally gather my sources, and then I was on. My concerns, as I put it to the producer when she took my call, were gender theory and infanticide. The latter one I didn't get to touch on. It had to do with the push for abortion up to birth. Well, frankly, I think it's surprising that I even got on, but I only got to touch on the first one, on gender theory, and I suppose that's good enough for me. It was something at least. I was asked, what do I mean by gender theory? It's the notion that gender is fluid and a man can become a woman by wishing it were so. I went on straight away to say that the ALP wants to make this stuff compulsory, for example, via their policies on conversion therapies. So, as I explained, if you're a doctor and someone comes to you with these unwelcome thoughts and you fail to affirm their chosen gender, then you could lose your licence to practice. Then there is the Safe Schools material, which teaches the same stuff and is now made compulsory under the Labor government in Victoria, and the federal ALP wants to do the same across the country, only they don't want to talk about it for the election. The response was hardly surprising. Phil Clark, the presenter, was in full denial mode, but I could at least say, dead set, I have read their policy platform, it's there. And of course, other listeners pounced on my comments, and you know what? I don't regret it for an instance. I look forward to doing it again and again should the opportunity arise. Why? Well, I refer you to my series on my case against the ALP. Look up my YouTube channel, Gaga with Passwords, or one word, and that should explain why. To other callers on the ABC program, important issues were a wish list on how they would like our tax dollars spent. Fine. But to me, the issue are things like actually basic human rights in this country. It is the welfare of our children, the basic foundation of our society. Bad economics can be fixed, but the social fabric is not so easy to rebuild, and believe me, Labor hates the lot of it. We must remember that the ALP self-describes as socialist, and I should say that should be enough. But they hate my God and hate everything else I stand for. But what about you? I suggest that you need to be informed. There is a lot of good material out there that can get you started. You don't have to be a university professor or something. I would point you to the Australian Christian lobby, which does a ring around at election time to the political parties to ask them about their stances on the various social issues of the day. And they put out a summary in tabulated form, very simple to digest, on where they stand. It's made freely available, and I suggest that you look out for it and have a look at it. The Australian Christian Lobby's Martin Iles does some very, very good commentary in a video program that he calls The Truth of It. I think that's the name of it. These about 10-minute videos are great, and I like them because he does quote his sources. He's quite easy to listen to, straight to the point, no nonsense, and he's factual. Martin Iles, by the way, is a human rights lawyer by background. Similarly, there are plenty of materials by groups such as the Canberra Declaration, Family Voice Australia, the Australian Family Coalition. Also great materials, and I suggest that you subscribe to their emails. Here is an example. rugby player Israel Folau is again under attack from his employers for standing up for his Christian beliefs. Where are we Christians on this one? Where were leaders of the Christian churches during the debate on gay marriage a couple of years ago? Their silence was largely deafening. Jesus did tell us to turn the other cheek. But I would also like to point to the story of St. Paul in Philippi. You can read it in the book of Acts. His ministry there attracted the ire of the local Jewish leadership, who whipped up a case against him, and so Paul was illegally flogged and imprisoned. When the governor realised his mistake, he tried to have Paul leave quietly and cover the issue over. But no, Paul would have none of that. Paul demanded a public apology and a proper escort out of the city. Both responses have their place. Christians in particular, this is a spiritual battle. And that battle, of course, is Jesus' battle, and only he can win it. That's for sure. But he uses us. We need to be armed and equipped for battle, armed with the facts, and join the fight via, is it talkback radio? You might not find that real comfortable. Is it via Facebook? Somewhat easier. Posting other material that you believe is worthwhile? Or is it producing your own material? How about engaging others in conversation about the issues at hand? I don't know what these activities will produce. Ultimately, that's up to Jesus, I guess. But I do know what silence will produce. Thank you.